All right, it's 11 a.m., so we will get started with today's webinar. My name is Kristen, and from all of us on David's team, I just want to extend a heartfelt thank you for committing to spend 90 minutes of your day with us. We know how busy you all are and that it's not always easy to take this time, but we are really confident that this investment of time will be extremely valuable for you and for what you're able to take back to your teams. For anyone that is joining us for the first time, I just want to take a moment to share a bit about David. David has more than 35 years of experience as a family therapist, workshop facilitator, lecturer, and advisor to leadership executives from all over the world. He's worked with CEOs from companies such as WestJet, Investors Group, Lilydale, PharmaSafe Drugs, and presented to countless organizations over the last several decades. David has written multiple books. He's a best-selling author and respected thought leader in the leadership community. David is extremely passionate about helping leaders lead better. And these monthly webinars are just one of the many ways that he's able to share his message and his knowledge with as many people as possible. So thank you again for being here today. And thank you for being a part of this incredible, diverse community. It's so exciting to see leaders from all over Canada and beyond in various lines of work and stages of their life and career with the common bond bringing us together that we want to show up as the best versions of ourselves. So whether this is your first time or you've been with us since the beginning, if you find value in today's session, we would really appreciate you sharing an invitation to our next webinar with someone in your life. As we all know, when it comes to leadership and learning, the journey and the responsibility never end. So without further ado, here's David.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you for your usual passion, and thank you everybody for being here. It's a real privilege to be here, and I tell you that you know, with all the tragedies that are happening in the world these days, I think this is a real luxury that we have to spend together this hour and a half. And I just want to pause and just appreciate this time. And my hope is that I'll do my part here to bring a little light into some of the darkness that you might be experiencing around you for a variety of reasons. So folks, I just want to relate a little bit to hopefully connect with you and with some of the pain points that some of you might be experiencing. An estimated 45 million people in North America have left their workplaces since the start of the pandemic. I don't know if that's accurate. I was brainstorming with a couple of CEOs on the phone the other day, and they happened to throw this number out. And I don't know, it might be 30 million, but let me tell you, it's a lot. A lot of people have left their workplaces. This has been a disruptive time where we have really shaken up our views of ourselves. We've shaken up the views of our values. We've really come to a place where we put a lot of more thought, and it's taken us into a reflective place. People are at various stages of readiness to recommit to being back in person and to recommit to engage. The challenge ahead for leaders is, how do we rebuild a renewed sense of community and commitment as we emerge out of this? So this is a challenging time, and I would argue it's a great opportunity for us to examine our leadership, for examining how we live, how we lead, how we build a culture around us. And I'm going to talk about culture today, but I'm not going to be talking about culture in terms of how do you build and align culture when there's 100 people or 1,000 people in your culture. What I'm going to be looking at, and you know, the longer I'm in this business, the more pessimistic actually I get about this notion of changing a large system culture. I know it's possible. I know that it's, that we do this work, and that if we were to really, make a 3-year commitment with some of your organizations, we know that we can build a renewed culture. Today, I'm going to focus on the microculture in your life. Today, I'm going to focus on maybe the 10 people on your team, maybe one person on your team, maybe it's a family, Whatever your microculture is that you're responsible for, maybe it's a culture of one in your own life. You'll be able to relate this to the immediate team, because that's where you can have impact as a parent, as a community leader, as a frontline leader in your organization, as a manager in your organization. So regardless of what that might look like, that's what we're going to be focusing on today. And I want to start with this notion of the difference between an association and a community. And one of the things that I'm going to be talking to you about is how do we build a community? And I think if you can reflect back in your own life, where in your own life have you been involved, maybe in a professional association, maybe it's an accounting association or HR association or a association of CEOs that get together and learn. And I think we've all been to some kind of an association meeting. Maybe it's a parenting association. And, you know, when we have people in this pandemic, we have people, well, first of all, right on this call today, it's an association of people. You come together. How do we make a community? At the end of this presentation, I'm going to talk about my 3-day leadership community, 3-day leadership workshop, virtual workshop. It's the academy, and how we build a community in 3 days. And there's people on this call that went through that academy. And it's something that I've really thought of. And I think whether we do it virtually or whether we do it in person, I think the potential to build a community is there, but there's some things to pay attention to, certainly when we come out of this thing virtually. So if you begin to think back in your own life about what an association has looked like, and these are the words that I describe an association. It's polite, it's proper, it's political, and it's what I call a discussion. In other words, the difference between a discussion and a dialogue is that a discussion comes from your head. A dialogue comes from your heart. A community is genuine, it's emergent, it evolves, it's authentic, it's real. And there's a sense of people can speak from their heart. I'm going to speak here for an hour, and I hope that we have some questions and answers afterwards. I'm going to stay on the phone, on the call after for a half an hour. And I hope that we will emerge into it, just a little bit of a taste of what a community is. And I think this is the challenge that's ahead of all of us. And maybe you've had a team that's been remote and you're emerging back into this thing called an in-person experience. But remotely, it's very easy to feel like we're just a loosely held group of people that come together and are polite and political or whatever. But what I really am talking about here is, where are you? To really ask yourself, where are you in your team, in your own culture, in this spectrum between an association and a community? Where are you on that spectrum? You know, if you're, you know, we have some teachers here. And every teacher understands that their work, when the child comes in, a group of kids come in September, you're a loosely held group of people that come together in this thing called a classroom. And your work as a leader is to turn that classroom into a community. That's the work of a leader, turning an association into a community. It was a very, very profound experience I had a few years ago, right? Well, it was a couple of years before the pandemic. We were in a hotel. We had a leadership retreat for 3 days. And it was really interesting that in the hotel, all of the staff in the hotel had their name tag, which was not unusual, but underneath their name tag was their passion. So this is Jakia, our server, actually, and her passion was for dance. She was from Peru. And she was talking about her passion for dance. And so it wasn't just a transactional experience where she came and served us our meals, but we actually had a chance to ask her, what does dance mean to you? And she just came alive. And then we would start sharing stories about what our passion was. And, you know, over the course of 3 days, getting to know people's passion, the staff at a hotel, it wasn't just this loosely held association where we came together and sort of hung out together in a transactional way over 3 days. We actually felt like when we left, we were leaving a community. It felt like there was something that was real, that was together when we were together, that was something bigger than just this loosely held group of people. So I've been keenly interested, in fact, and passionate about how do we come together and actually form a community. Which is more important, asked Big Panda, the journey or the destination? The company, said Tiny Dragon. So it's the company. How do we do this? So what I've done here is I've outlined my experience and research and understanding over doing this work for 35 plus years. I've got 4 fundamental human needs that people have to build community, that builds energy and a sense of belonging. And I don't care whether you're in the middle of a pandemic and have to have a lot of protocols and we have to work separately and keep people safe, or whether we're in person, we're still human beings with the same fundamental needs. And I want to show you my experience of how we help people meet those needs. And one of the things that I would assess is just look at your own team right now and ask them. Ask yourself, and I'll give you some really practical tools at how you can actually assess whether people's needs are being met in these 4 areas. How safe do people feel? Just start to reflect on it right now. How safe do people feel? Psychologically and physically. How supported do they feel? Do they feel a sense of significance? Do they feel that their contribution actually makes a difference, makes an impact? And do they feel stretched? Do they feel challenged? Is there a sense of I'm going to call it even stress, that people feel as though they're challenged in the context of this? So we're going to take these one at a time, and I'm just going to walk you through this, and we'll start with safety. Now, you've heard, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on safety. We spent a lot of time, if you were in my last webinar, you understand the safety triangle. And underneath trust and communication and creativity, engagement, and results, people need to feel safe. If people don't feel safe, none of that's going to happen. And I can tell you, a few years ago, I was out walking in a local trail, and I got stalked by a cougar. And I'll tell you, I don't know what I was thinking about before the cougar came up behind me. You know, he was back about 50 meters. I don't know what I was talking about, but I'll tell you, when you get activated like that, when you're in the presence of a wild animal, that your life becomes in threat, I can tell you that nothing else became more important than survival at that moment. So if people don't feel safe, folks, they are not going to feel engaged. They're not going to be creative. They're not going to be accountable. They're not going to build relationships. First and foremost, you got to pay attention to people's sense of safety. And as we discussed last time, people, you know, cells in the human body, and this is biological. You know, I took a course a few years ago called The Biology of Leadership. And what it was a look at how understanding biology helped you be a better leader. And basically what we learned is that cells have 2 purposes. They either protect or they grow. And if you want your organization to be in a growth mode, you can't be having them be afraid. You have to really help them feel safe, because if people are protecting themselves, they can't grow. And when you feel safe, then you can grow. But you're either in one place or another. And this is biology. It's not just psychology. I was in a store, a grocery store actually, a few weeks ago, and a woman beside me in the fruit section in the store was completely BPE'd. She had a gown on, she had glasses on, she had her mask on, she had rubber gloves on. It was like she was walking into an intensive care unit. Now, this woman obviously did not feel safe in that store. Now, my immediate response was, this is a little neurotic. This is a little bit like, I don't know this, but I don't know anybody that got COVID from a fruit section in a grocery store. I imagine it might have happened, but she felt very unsafe. Now, if I were to have turned to her and was honest with her and said, you know, this is a little neurotic. You don't need to feel this much fear here. This is a safe place. We're moving out of this pandemic. You're going to be okay. If I would have said to that person those things, it might have been honest. But do you think that she would have said in response to my comment, do you think she might have said, really? You mean it is safe in here? Do you think that my response of judgment, being it right or wrong, do you think my response of judgment would have inspired her to take off her gown and her gloves and said, and trust? I suspect not. What it would do is create defensiveness, which is just another response to protection. And she would wall up more and distance herself more from that experience. The only chance that I would have if a person like this were on my team and didn't feel safe, the only chance I would have for her to risk would be to say, you don't feel safe right now. Tell me about it. It's okay not to feel safe. For whatever reason in her world, in her perception of the world, she didn't feel safe. And what she needs from me, like we all need, is when we don't feel safe, is we need a space where we can say and experience ourselves as not feeling safe. Acceptance is the answer to all of our problems. And acceptance leads to a sense of safety, potentially. So how do we create a place of acceptance? You heard from my, well, if you were in my last monthly webinar, thanks for coming back. But if you were in my last, we spent more time on this. We're hiding, where we downplay or cover up certain aspects of yourself in order to feel safe. This is the human condition. And many of us were raised in environments where we weren't safe. And if any of you, have ever lived in an environment or worked in an environment where you had to give up your heart or your needs or a sense of beauty or truth, I can't speak the truth around here because it's not safe to do that, or give up your passion or creativity, your sexual orientation, your ethnic heritage, your gender, your dreams. If you ever have been in a relationship, work-wise or personal, where you give up a part of yourself, that's, folks, where your genius lies. And if you give up a part of yourself, you, as Buckminster Fuller used to say, the great philosopher, we degenius ourselves. We diminish our genius, our gifts, when we don't feel safe to be who we are. So here's psychological safety, and defined as I belong here. I don't have to hide to feel safe. I'm valued for what I offer, and I don't have to leave who I am at the door. Think of the places where you've ever worked, where you had to leave who you are at the door, and then ask yourself, how's your level of engagement during that, while you're leaving who you are at the door, pretending that you're somebody that you're not. It's expected that I can speak up at any time to anybody whenever I'm not feeling safe. And it's okay to make mistakes, to learn, to grow, and to be challenged. This is my definition of psychological safety. Now, how do you assess this? Well, you assess it. Here's a call to action. I'm going to give you a call to action under each of these 4 needs. So first of all, a story of safety. What I would say is, and by the way, I learned this from WestJet years ago, back in the 90s, when I was working with them around culture, and when they really had a profound culture. And in fact, when Clyde Beddoes started WestJet, he started it on the notion of culture being his competitive advantage, being their competitive advantage. And they had a practice of culture. Every meeting, they never started a meeting without a story. So one of the stories you can tell is, let's tell a story here. If you want to create a value of safety or respond to people's need around safety, just tell a story about where did we create a place here where people felt safe? Where did we create a place where people felt they could be who they are? Okay. Where did we feel as though we could contribute here in a safe way? Okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, how safe do you feel here? Now, if you don't feel as though that team will be honest with you, you can do this virtually, you can do this in person, doesn't matter. But on a scale of 1 to 10, let's go around the room and ask yourself, how safe do you feel? Now, if you don't know whether people will be honest with you about that, no problem. That's a good red, it's a good red flag. It's a good indicator. But if you're not sure whether people are going to be honest, what you do is you start with the lowest denominator. So it might be one-on-one, where you say, how safe do you feel here? And you start one-on-one. Now, what's the worst number you can get? For those of you who've heard me speak, you know what the answer is here. The worst number you can get is not 1. Because if people don't feel, you'll never get a 1. Because if people don't feel safe, then they'll, unless it's a real exception to the rule, if people don't feel safe, they're not going to feel safe enough to give you a 1. So the worst number you can get, the biggest red flag, is a 5. It doesn't matter what number people give you, and it doesn't even matter that people feel honest to give you the right number, because the number is not what's important. The next question is what's important. What would take it up a notch in the next month? What could I do in the next month? What could you do? What could we work together? And start really small, and maybe just one thing that you could begin to do to build greater psychological or physical safety in that organization, that culture. How safe do you feel around here? Now, if you ask this to a teenager, and you just happen to have grounded them last week, they're not going to tell you that they rate very high. And so sometimes you have to take into consideration that most feedback that's going to come to you has more to do with the sender than it has to do with the receiver. So you take that into consideration, but don't ever discard any feedback, because all feedback has an element of truth in it. So get some feedback. What would take it up a notch? And how can you help hold me accountable for making progress in this area of safety? And so you begin to recognize it, put it on your radar screen, and begin to work with it. All right, that's really all I wanted to say about safety. What I want to do now is move to, do people feel supported on your team? Do they feel a sense of real support? Now, this traditionally is the old, outdated model. It's a patriarchal parental model where the CEO is on the top and the frontline workers are on the bottom. And the first thing I would absolutely do is turn that thing upside down, so that this is what's called servant leadership. And when you begin to move to stewardship, the stewardship model, where you move from subordinates to people under your care, delete the word subordinate and say, these are the people under my care. Do people under you, what we call under you, do they feel that actually they're on top and that you're actually serving them? Have you turned that organizational, that org chart upside down? And do people feel as though they're supported by you? Do they feel, now there's a difference, folks, between servant leadership and pleasing leadership. We're not here to please people in terms of making them happy by giving them what they want. What we're here to do is to serve them so that they can do their job, get the resources that they need, and be successful and grow in the process. And do people feel deeply that you have their back, that you are there to serve, not just demand and put expectations on them? Okay, so this is the balancing act that all leaders work with. You have expectations, but you also have a requirement for support. Now, you don't want to let the support get heavier than the expectations. You don't want to give more support than the expectations. You want a little bit of being out of balance so that you can move toward growing. But there's got to be a reasonable balance between, these are my expectations for you, and this is the support that I'm going to offer you. And what this does is it turns it into an accountable partnership rather than an employee-boss relationship. It's a partnership where I have expectations of you, you have expectations of me. I have support requirements to meet those expectations. You have support requirements to meet those expectations. And what will we agree to work together? And then an evergreen plan is, how often do we need to meet so we keep our agreement alive and that we keep energy in it? And it moves it from a parent-child relationship, which has been so prevalent in our organization in these last several generations, really, to a partnership role, where we begin to see, you know what, I value you, and we're holding each other accountable. I'm not just holding you accountable, we're holding each other accountable because we have support from each other. It's what Covey used to talk about, the relationship account. And his argument would be that a relationship is like a bank account. And you just look in your own life right now and just check out the relationships in your own life. And ask yourself, am I in the black in these relations? It could be a relationship with a niece or a nephew or a child, a spouse, a significant other in your life. It could be a relationship with a colleague, a team member. It could be a relationship with your boss. It could be a relationship with anybody under your care. But ask yourself and just take a little inventory. And maybe it's been, hey, you know what, this pandemic, we've been working remotely. Our relationship has really taken a hit. I haven't made the deposits that's necessary. Maybe I'm in the pink right now in those relationships. Take an honest, thorough inventory of those relationships. The whole notion here is that relationships like a bank account, you can't make a withdrawal, folks, until you make a deposit. And we're always inadvertently or unintentionally, we're always going to be making withdrawals in relationship. I could potentially be saying something today that you might be perceiving as a withdrawal. It might be disrespectful in your perception. Yeah, I don't have control over that. But what I do know is that I want to make some deposits and that I'm open to hearing if I do make withdrawals, because that in itself can be a deposit. But just ask yourself, what is needed right now in the relationships in your life in terms of deposits? Now, maybe if you've been really distant and you've been working remotely, you say, you know what, I've taken maybe we've all been very insular and everybody's had their own stress to deal with. Or maybe, we've had a necessary service and people feel really discounted because they haven't been able to work at home because we're working under we have to continue to work, and everybody else seems to get these perks from this pandemic. Regardless, it's all, or most of it is perception. But just take an inventory and ask yourself, what deposits are needed in a relationship right now? Where am I in the pink? And there may be some relationships in your life that are in the black. What have you done to make those deposits? And I think the three big deposits are appreciation, encouragement, and empathy. Do people really feel appreciated? Do they feel a sense of encouragement from you, a recognition? And do they feel a sense of empathy? Have you really listened to what they've been going through? Now, Gary Chapman wrote a book which many of you may be familiar with called The Languages of Love. He's a family therapist, and then he rewrote and it's a great little book for couples. Many of you are sure familiar with the book. But then he rewrote it years later with Paul White, and he put it in terms of the context of the workplace, where we have the language of appreciation. We all experience appreciation differently. We all kind of have a primary language, one or two languages, that we receive appreciation differently, and we have to know people enough to know that just because our language works for us doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to connect with other people. So, for example, in my own life, my primary language is I love words. I love crafting words. I love writing. And if you want to express appreciation, by the way, it's a little plug for some feedback. But if you want to express appreciation, put it in the chat room. Send me an email after we're finished. Kristen's going to extend some links to you let me know. I started what's called an encouragement file years ago, even in the 80s, before computers came along. And when I got a thank you note from a client or a friend, I would put it in this encouragement file, and the file got like this thick. And it was interesting because I whenever I'd had a bad day, I'd just go into that file and find those words. Then when computers came along, I started to develop a file on my drive. And, I still have to this day an encouragement file that I keep when people send me an email that values what I do. And I forget what I do, and I don't value sometimes. And I forget that I make a difference and that I dip into this encouragement file. So if you want to express appreciation to me, express it through words. I'm also a physical touch guy. I'm a hugs and handshake guy. I love putting my hands on people's shoulders or, shaking hands. This is one of the reasons why the pandemic's been very hard for me, because I miss that in-person contact. Now, my wife, for example, her primary language is not words. I can tell her how amazing she is, and then it's not that she doesn't enjoy the words, but they don't really sink in the way that they do with me. And if you want to show my wife her language of love is to say, pick up the vacuum cleaner and do some bloody work. Or really what she does is, if we're working on a project, certainly raising kids together, running our business together, working in the yard work, doing together. This is how she feels really valued, when we're acts of service, doing something together. So know your people well enough to know when that's required. How do they experience appreciation? Some people just don't expect that your language of appreciation is going to be there for everybody, for everybody. So I just have a little story here. It's a little side story, but it illustrates, folks, that when it comes to relationships and connections and appreciation and support, the little things are the big things. So there's a little backstory to this story. This is my amazing daughter, one of my amazing daughters. And this is taken on the 102nd. This is on top of the Empire State Building in New York, actually. So the story goes that when we as a family saved up to go to Expo in 1967, we took a trip down to New York. Now, I was 11 then, my brother was 15. We were taking him to boarding school because he was going to boarding school in Quebec. But one of the deals was that I wanted to get to the top of the Empire State Building. We went to New York and we had a little tour. I have an uncle that lived down there at the time. And so he took us around New York. And so the deal was I wanted to get to the top of the New York State Building, the Empire State Building. And he wanted to get to the stock market. So he wanted to go and watch watch the stock market. I wanted to get to the top of the Empire State Building. So we were running late and it was 3:30 and the Empire, I still to this day remember it, 1967. And we were on the 86th floor and it was 3:30 in the afternoon. And so that was, there's two viewing points. So one was at the 86th and one's 102nd. So at the 86th floor, my mother said, no, we don't have time to go to the 102nd floor. We're going to go to the stock market. So we don't miss the stock market because the stock market closes at 4 o'clock. So we had to race over the stock market. Well, all through my childhood, for the rest of my childhood, and my kids all knew my despair about never getting to the top of the Empire State Building. Well, my daughter who teaches high school English and drama, she took her students a few years ago down to the to New York, went to a Broadway show. She went up on top of the Empire State Building and she sent me this text. She said, Dad, you made it to the top of the Empire State Building. You don't have to complain about it anymore. So you don't have to despair about it anymore. So this little thing, I'll tell you, made such a difference to me. This sense of, and then we return the favor. I'm flying actually this weekend to Ottawa to watch Haley run a marathon, her first marathon. So, this is how we support each other, is by recognizing. Now we see this in our families, but are we doing this in our workplaces? Who needs some recognition? Who needs a sense of appreciation in your workplace? So here's a call to action under support. Again, talk about a story. Where have people here felt a sense of support? Where have they supported each other? Number 2, on a scale of 1 to 10, how supported do you feel right now? What would take it up a notch in the next month? Put it on your radar. What would you like me to stop, start, and continue to do so that you feel a sense of more support? What concerns you? What matters to you? How can I support you to care about what's important to you? Find out about people. I've seen people who have worked together for years and don't know the answer to number 5. What concerns you? What matters to you? What really is important in your life? And then support people. If you're helping people, support them to find out and live their values. This is what gets people engaged. We know today that corporate and research will bear this out, that people do not get engaged through fancy value statements in an organization. It doesn't mean that you don't need value statements as a culture. But what gets people engaged is not the culture values. What gets people engaged is when they can bring and are supported to bring their own personal values to what they're doing. That's what engages people. Okay. All right. Now, the next need I want to talk about is significance. And what does it mean to be, to find significance in your life? Okay. I believe there's this thing called life force that we're all born with. This sense of aliveness. And if there's anybody that hangs out with, by the way, this is my 26-year-old daughter. This is my 26-year-old daughter when she was, I think, about 10 years old here. But we are all born with this sense of a life force, this sense of aliveness. Everybody spend time with kids, you know that life force is very prevalent in their life. We come with this sense of energy, this sense of passion for the world and for life. And then we grow up sometimes in environments that aren't safe to bring that life force, and that we learn to shut it off in the course of our life. And how many of you also understand that age is not necessarily a detriment to that life force? How many of you have ever felt or seen a 90-year-old or an 80-year-old who has more life energy than a 6-year-old? So, you know, I'm always curious about how people discover their life force and keep their life force even during the course of their lifetime. So this is my own journey through this. So this is my grandfather. Now, this is my maternal grandfather, who could stand on his head when he was 95 years old. And he inspired me early on in my life to take care of myself, to develop good health habits, and to push yourself. Now, then it became my father. It was very fascinating. This is my dad, who's my, obviously, you know, these two have a lot in common without knowing it. But my own dad was the Canadian gymnastics champion back in the 1940s. And this is ingrained in me, and I'm hardwired around this to inspire. So this is on my 65th birthday. This is what this is where I get life force, I'm hardwired to the physical challenge. And I think most of why I keep my body in shape is mentally, and I have a dream that I will one day be able to stand on my head when I'm 95 years old. But the dream is that my health will never be a barrier to my passion and my purpose in life, and that my body will always carry me. Now, you know what? Many of us keep our life force in various forms. I tell you, on this call today is Mark Barr, our client care vice president of client care, who has been looking after our clients for the last 5-6 years now. And she's 70 years old. She's had 2 knee replacements, but her life force is strong because she's so committed to supporting our work here. So Martha Graham, the great dancer and choreographer, said it this way: there is a vitality, a life force, a quickening that is translated through you to action. And because there's only one of you in all time, this expression is unique. And if you block it, it will never exist through any other medium. It will be lost. My question is, folks, how are you tapping into the life force, the vitality of the people on your team? It is not your business to determine how good it is or how valuable it is or how it compares to other expressions. It is simply your business to keep it yours clearly and directly, to keep the channel open. So what are you doing to keep that life force alive within your team? Now, again, I come back to the whole notion of an ikigai, which is life force through authentic alignment. And your ikigai is the Japanese word for your reason for being. Your gifts aligned with your passion, aligned with your contribution. And my notion is fit people, don't fix people. We have spent far too much time as leaders finding people's weaknesses and then strengthening their weaknesses. This is not, you're going to find a good return on investment. Far better is it to find people's strengths and build on their strengths. And I don't know whether it's the education system that we've been raised in, or the way we've experienced life as a child, but how many of us, if we were to bring home a report card and we had 5 B's and 1 F, what would get noticed? We always notice what we didn't do right. And I think it might be a better investment. Maybe that F, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't put work into that F, but maybe we'd get a better return on our investment if we took 1 or 2 of those B's and turned them into A's than it would be to turn one of that F into a B. So maybe that F just simply isn't our gift. It's not our unique ability. It's not our talent. And so it takes time to invest in a relationship where we really explore what are our gifts? What is our passion? Some of us do things that we're good at, but we don't necessarily have a passion for it. And this inner circle is what's called your sweet spot. How much time do you spend in that sweet spot? Just take an inventory right now in your own work in the last couple of weeks. What percentage of your time was spent doing your ikigai in that sweet spot? Now, if that ikigai is in your paid work, we call that a vocation. If it's away from your paid work, which maybe we're supporting people to find their reason for being away from their work, that's called an invocation, an avocation rather. So, sometimes we can experience, it doesn't mean that we have to get paid for this, but be clear, what percentage of your time? Now, I had an accountant ask me once, what's the right number? Well, that's a good accounting question. But let's suppose that 20% of your work in the last week was in your ikigai, was in your sweet spot. There's nothing wrong with that 20%. The question is, where's the other 80%? Maybe it's in your personal life. But what if we could take that 20% and grow that to 30%? What if we could help you take some projects right now that you would love, that would really be in your wheelhouse, and build those projects? And what if you could begin to say no to the things that aren't in your wheelhouse and delegate them to somebody else that might be in somebody else's wheelhouse? We're not going to get it perfect, but there's got to be a commitment here where people feel significant, that they really matter, that their gifts and their passion makes a difference. I got to tell you, Kristen on our team here is a total giver. And, you're going to see a video that she helped edit just yesterday. She helped me edit it in preparation for this. Well, you know what? She's a contributor, and she takes those gifts and those passions and contributes. And this is one of the reasons why she's created a place here for herself where she's engaged and alive. And we actually, Kristen and I, have never met each other in person. We've always had a virtual relationship. So you don't need to have an in-person relationship in order to foster this, folks. But it's a matter of keeping it on your radar and really being aware, rather than just giving people a job and expecting them to do a job. It's really helping them align their job, their work, with their ikigai, with their contribution aligned with their gifts. So ask people, really explore. It's very difficult to find out what your gifts are. It's hard to see them. That's why we have a mirror, because your gifts are so close to you. We need those reflected back. But that's the work of a leader, to say, you know what, how are we doing with your gifts and your passion? And what could we do to build this? And frankly, folks, maybe there's no alignment in the organization. Then maybe what you're doing is helping them do it outside of their work, and then that becomes a job. Then be grateful for your job. Or maybe it means, you know what, there's just not a place here for you, and we need to help you move on. Or we can take that inventory for ourselves. I use the example of my daughter. My daughter grew up in a hockey town. We grew up in just west of Calgary here in Cochrane, and she's a performing artist, but she tried to be an athlete. And by the way, if you're anything but an athlete, a soccer athlete, hockey, you just don't feel like you fit in. And she never really felt that she was at home with herself until she got into grade 9 and discovered a performing arts teacher who helped her find her voice. And this is really, truly where she came home to herself. This is in her reason for being. And she went to a performing arts school, University of Alberta, graduated in fine arts and English. And she took a month-long clown class in her last year of university. And I was so proud of her. This is where she shone. This is where her life purpose is. This is her ikigai. And now she's taken that gift and applied it into high school, where she teaches drama and English, and she helps other people find their ikigai through performing art and through English and through poetry. This is her place. So what is your place? And how are you, it's hard to find the place of your team if you don't know your own place. It's hard to take people where you haven't been. And so what are we doing to connect people to their inner passion and their gifts? And what are we doing to connect ourselves, and taking that time away to really connect and get some guidance to ourselves? Okay. Now let me, in the last 15 minutes, let me talk about being stretched, and let me talk about being challenged. And this is a critical component. It isn't just about being safe and supported and significant. That's the soft stuff in organizations. But there's the hard part about saying, you know what, we got a job to do and we're going to push ourselves through this. Now, it's my experience, and I'm just going to digress just slightly here because we all had parents, but I think we've been raised in a generation where we've extracted the stressful part. And we've wanted to try to make it safe for kids, and we've wanted to make it supportive, and we want to help them be significant and give them a ribbon for participation. But folks, if we don't push, if we don't help really encourage the stretch part, there's unintended consequences to that. What happens is today we get snowplow parents. And by the way, our organizations are the recipients of a generation where there's some snowplow parents, where we prepare the road for the child. We make it easy for the child, as opposed to teaching the child, which are accountable parents, where we prepare the child for the road. And in the process, also prepare the child to make new roads. This is about stretching, and this has energy in us. What we end up with is entitlement. And I love Brene Brown's definition of entitlement. I deserve something just because I want it. If there's no stretch, if it's all easy, if kids get what they want, if we rescue them from their unhappiness, these are some of the unintended consequences. We end up with consumerism versus contribution. I just want you to notice the energy in these two groups. The energy between being self-focused. Who knows what they're doing on their devices? I know I'm making a judgment, but the notion of being internally focused versus externally focused, which is to say, I'm going to make a difference. I can tell you that it getting out of ourselves, stretching beyond our own self-interest, stretching beyond ourselves is highly engaging in organizations. It isn't what we give to people that engages them. It's what we create to allow our people to give to us and to the world that is really truly what creates engagement. And if we take stretch out of the equation, we also get, this is Calvin Hobbes, I've decided I want to be a millionaire when I grow up. Well, I have to work pretty hard to get $1 million. No, I won't. You will. Me, I just want to inherit it. This sense of entitlement. We also creates anxiety with kids that comes from a lack of confidence in one's ability to handle the demands of life. And we create burnout as parents because we're doing all the work rather than helping life stretch kids. And I actually don't think we need to stretch kids a whole lot. What we need to do is create an environment where we don't rescue them from the world stretching them. So what we're saying here, folks, is that growth happens outside of your comfort zone, and not just growth, but energy happens outside of your comfort zone. People don't engage in their comfort zone. We have to stay safe, but we also have to push people. We have to balance this supporting people with the push part. This is the growth. This is where the growth is. And, one of the questions that I would ask you is when is the last time you've been on your team, been outside of your comfort zone? Now, maybe they just need a lot of safety right now and support. But at some point, we want to really move towards saying, what are we doing to help people move beyond their comfort zone? So I'm going to show you a little video here. And this is a video of a young girl on her skateboard. And I want you to notice this. Some of you undoubtedly have seen this video. We've edited it down, thanks to Kristen yesterday. But what it shows, I want you to watch this through a leadership lens, through a culture lens. And I want you to notice a couple of things. First of all, I'd like you to notice the support around her, the support, the safety, the significance in the team around her. Now, she's got a young sibling that hugs her and prays for her before she takes this action. She's got coaches, she's got a father, and I want you to notice the support around her. Second thing I'd like you to notice is the impact of stretching, not just on this young girl and what it did for her, but what it did for the entire team when we're stretching ourselves and pushing ourselves outside of our comfort zone. And recognizing that this is a part of a healthy culture to get out of our comfort zone. Notice the impact on all the players during this little exercise. And anyway, enjoy. Oh, I'll just say it this. Oh, I forgot this slide here. I always forget what came up next. So stretching involves three things. It involves a vision, a compelling reason for why we're stretching. It involves a safe, supportive community, and it involves courage. And I'd like you, that's the last thing I want you to watch as you watch this video, is I want you to watch how these three things came to pass, and the impact of these three actions of stretching.
Have you done it yet?
No.
No? First jump?
Yeah.
You got it.
Got it.
So Sky, so you can really feel it with your legs, and then you can just ride over the gap. You don't have to pump it on the way up. You can, you don't have to. And as soon as you take off, you'll know you're gonna clear it. You know what I mean? Like as soon as you get to the top of that thing, you'll be like, oh, I'm gonna make it. There you go. Switch for you. Old guy coming through.
Crazy. Got it, Sky.
You got it, Sky.
Okay.
Got it, Sky.
You got it.
Same thing.
You got it.
You got it, Sky, for sure. 100%.
Full confidence.
Okay, going.
You got it.
Yeah, Sky.
Okay, just gotta go. Guys, got it, Sky. Just go it. Okay, I'm going.
Same
Going.
thing.
Okay.
Nice
Get it.
easy. You got it, Sky.
Yeah!
Look better than mine. Yes, Sky.
That felt big. That felt
Yeah, Sky. Nice.
Dude, you got it. That was it. So with straight airs, you kind of want to like tweak it, because if you just hold it, it'll feel like you're moving around. Everything's really slow, you know? It's gonna like kind of keep you level. But you almost had that one. Third try!
That felt good.
Oh, this is so loud.
I want to get the whole line.
So folks, no one ever took pride or earned self-worth by doing something easy. So what have you done that's hard lately? And what have you done to create what's hard to build a better team? And what are we doing to stretch? And you know what? There could be stretch stories that could be told over the last 2 to 3 years that people have had to stretch to get through this thing. And telling those stories can be a way of engaging your team. Here's a call to action. How are you supporting each other on your team to stretch? Now, maybe what you do is you create a whiteboard of stories, and that and it could be stretching away from work. It could be stretching, hey, this is what I did away from work this week to get out of my comfort zone. And how did that impact my relationship with the team? Or how are we supporting somebody on the team that had to make a stretch. And some of those stretches might be little stretches, but little for one person might be big for another. What are we doing to keep our radar focused on stretching in a supportive, caring, safe, significant environment? That's where stretching happens. Now, I have my own story about this. And some of you I know have heard this story, but I will share my own personal experience with stretching. So I am claustrophobic. I have experienced very extreme claustrophobia. My big claim to fame that I know that my kids got me through was when I was in the submarine at West Edmonton Mall several years ago. My kids were in elementary school. And when we got into this mall, into the submarine, we were staying at West Edmonton Mall for the weekend. And I don't think they have that submarine there anymore. But anyway, the submarine went down. And as soon as the door closed and the submarine went under the water, the guide that was taking us through it said, if anybody gets claustrophobic, there is a way to there is a way to exit. And I just lost it. Like my hands got sweaty. I had an anxiety attack. I just lost it. And I had to go up to the guide and said, I'm one of your star pupils here. I got to get out of here. So you go out of an emergency exit, you come up and you get a little life raft in West Edmonton Mall that takes you up these stairs. And so my kids to this day would laugh at that. Well, anyway, through several years ago, or a few years after this, we wanted to go caving in Utah. And my first attempt at this is the guide, and this is the introduction to the cave. Now, we didn't have this guide to begin at our first round. And the first round, when I went there, I couldn't do it. I tried to get in it. It's about an hour and a half in this cage, about this height. And I lasted about 2 minutes, and I had to turn around and come back. 3 years later, we went back, and I said to my kids, you know what? You're going to watch me get through this. I'm going to get through this, and I'm going to find a way to get through it. I was sweating profusely for weeks before we went down there because I knew what I was up against, and I missed this opportunity. And when we got there, this was our guide, and his name was Royce, and he's actually a school teacher that does this voluntarily he's the park ranger there during the summer, and he guides tours through the cave. And I went up to him and I said, listen, I'm claustrophobic and I need your help. And that sense of vulnerability, and my kids saw this and they know that I'm going to be real about this. And I went up to him and I said, I need your help. And he put his hand on my shoulder, and he gave me the flashlight. And he says, here, bring your kids along. You're going to walk up front right with me. And you know what? You're not alone. We're going to get through this. And I spent an hour and a half in this cave, and I got through it. And it was a team effort, but they supported me and we got through it. And I can't tell you the impact that had on my family to get us through this. Not to mention Royce, he and I actually became good friends. We sent emails back and forth and collaborated back and forth for a few years after that, actually. And I just let him know the impact that he had on. So when someone can help you through a challenging time and help you stretch, it makes a huge difference. And when you're the recipient of being supported through stretch, it makes a huge difference. So those are the 4 fundamental needs. I'd love to hear stories from you about how you have created this kind of an environment where these 4 needs get met with people on your team. I'd love to know the impact. I'd love to hear from you afterwards, the impact that these 4 needs, meeting these needs and responding to these challenges have made as we come back. So just in conclusion, my whole premise, folks, is in the Other Everest is this journey into the inner self. Now, what we've talked about today are leadership abilities, practices. This is leadership presence, which is the core of what we're doing here. And I'm going to tell you that you don't get here through, I'm old school. I came from a place in the 80s where we would go for leadership development a month a year. where we understood that leadership wasn't just about techniques and abilities. As important as those are, everything I've talked about today comes from the core of who you are, and investing in your own development and investing in yourself and growing as a person. And so what we talk about in the 3-day academy is the first day is all about leadership presence, the core of who you are. The second day is leadership practice, and then the third day is integration. And we build quite a remarkable community over the course of 3 days. We get some remarkable people there from a diverse group all over the country to come together and learn together and learn how to build a community together. And it's a transformational experience. For some people, they talk about leaving with greater confidence. Some people, it's clarity. Some people, a greater connection with themselves and others. And some people, it's just really a sense of lifelong community that they're a part of here. So you're not alone. All right. So on that note, I'm going to stop sharing my slides.